Hello traders, today is going to be a really quick video on the relationship between margin lending and the price of Bitcoin. Let's dive in. All right, traders, when a lot of people are borrowing Bitcoin, that's typically quite bearish. When a lot of people are borrowing USDT, that's typically quite bullish. What this ratio gives us from OKEX is, or OKEX, I still don't know how to pronounce it, is the ratio of how many people are borrowing Tether to how many people are borrowing Bitcoin. So when this ratio rises, that means that less people are borrowing Bitcoin, more people are borrowing Tether, which means that potential buyers are on the rise. When the ratio drops, that means that more people are borrowing Bitcoin, less people borrowing Tether, bearish, because there are more potential sellers, right? So what I look out for on this indicator is rapid spikes, rapid drops, and also all-time highs and all-time lows in the indicator itself. One of them we can see here is, if you look here, each of these data points is taken at the beginning of the hour. Now at 9 a.m., you can see that this ratio is dropping, that at 9 a.m. it really dropped, right? What happened at 9 a.m.? Well, at the beginning of 9 a.m., that was actually when price dumped. Now, why did price, do this? Well, this isn't like the end-all be-all indicator, but what we can see here is even though price was rising historically, what was happening? Well, what was happening is that people were borrowing more Bitcoin than they were borrowing Tether during that price rise, which is a pretty bad sign, because that means that there's a lot of potential sellers out there who are borrowing Bitcoin to sell it, right, to short. But then what we see is this rapid jump in the margin lending ratio at 10 a.m. on the open. And you can see here that that's actually what began this little local uptrend. We can see that when people started to borrow more Tether, price rose, right? And then it dropped off a cliff at 12 o'clock, and then you can see what happened at 12 o'clock. Nothing. Really kind of price went down a bit. So why does this matter? Well, this is a measure for me, not just of sentiment of how many people are interested in buying Bitcoin or selling Bitcoin, but more of how many potential buyers and how many potential sellers there are out there. If I see this ratio just climbing like this is quite bullish. This began last night at about 21 o'clock. Where are you? Yeah, it began around here. And I knew that overall this pattern to me looks more bullish than it does look bearish for sure. But if we look very historically, I found that this indicator doesn't work as well on the daily. And that's probably because this value fluctuates a lot over the day. And the daily is just going to give you one value when in reality there's like a lot of others during that day. So that is something to keep in mind. I think that the best times to use this on are the 5 minute and the 1 hour for sure. We can also look at Ethereum. And Ethereum, I actually haven't looked at this one yet. Let's go to Ethereum Perp, which is FTX, and it's making an all-time high, which is lovely. And you can see here that even though it was making an all-time high, it seems like more and more people are borrowing Ethereum. And yeah, so that ended at 13 o'clock. So it looks like this up move wasn't really supported by this theory. This up move, we don't really see a lot of people borrowing Tether. We see more people borrowing Ethereum, which could mean that potential sellers are on the rise. So just from that information, we can see that potential sellers are possibly coming into Ethereum. If we look at let's look at the 5 minute to get a little bit more granular on Ethereum. Yeah, it seems like this ratio really tanked. So a lot of people started to borrow Ethereum around here. That doesn't mean that there's a guarantee that Ethereum will go down, but it does mean that there are more potential sellers out there. This kind of downfall, down spike, or whatever you call it, began at about 15 o'clock. Now let's go on the 5 minute, get a little bit more short term. Oh yeah, there it is. So we can see that, well, what ended up happening here. This isn't like a complete like, oh yeah, like it predicted it. This is more like, this is just more interesting to me because 15 o'clock, you can just see this kind of like just tanked. A lot of people started to borrow Ethereum here. And when a lot of people started to borrow Ethereum at around 15 o'clock, let's see how that corresponds with selling. Well, it looks like the sellers did kind of begin to take control. I mean, not beautifully. We can see this burst in buy volume here. But then after that buying stops, the sellers kind of take control here. And that's actually, that kind of makes sense to me. This isn't like perfect, but what I can potentially get out of this is we see a large drop because people start to borrow Ethereum. because they start to borrow Ethereum, we can see sell volume beginning to come in a little bit. Although I wouldn't think that this is like the absolute best indicator to use. I think that this is something, and it's definitely something that I will be using, like for sure, because I'm interested in knowing how many people are borrowing. Because that's going to tell me, you know, when are potential sellers at an all-time high? When are potential buyers at an all-time high? And potential sellers are probably at an all-time high on a coin, or not all-time high, but a local high, at least when this is really, really low at like 1250. Here. Yeah. At this market top, you can see that this value was getting too low. Just too many people were borrowing Ethereum at this point. We got the correction right there. So let's see if this holds true for other coins too. Let's go to, let's do Ripple, a very controversial coin to say the least. So it doesn't look like too much is happening here. Oh, wow. A lot of people starting to not borrow XRP, starting to borrow USD instead of Ripple. Interesting. Beginning at about 1205, Ripple really, So this doesn't really seem that bearish to me. I was expecting something like uber bearish, but no. Look at that. Yeah. This doesn't really seem like too bearish to me. If anything, this seems like moderately bullish. So at 12 o'clock, beginning at 12 o'clock, right around here-ish, we begin to see what looks like a lot of people borrowing Tether and not as many people borrowing Ripple. So that could be a sign of a decent amount of potential buyers on XRP right now. So I wouldn't be shocked to see XRP begin to maybe test those highs or even break those highs. And you can see that some selling has happened here, but I think that the potential buying is still very likely there. And I say that because of how high this ratio is. All right, so I'm gonna end this video on Bitcoin because I just wanted to more show this off. I didn't want to like make a whole long form video on this. Yes, the 5-minute looks like we have potential sellers coming in. So that means that there's a fair amount of people who are borrowing Bitcoin. You can see that this ratio went from about a 16.35 from USD borrowing to USDT borrowing to Bitcoin borrowing ratio. And we see that number really dropped here, which is a little bit worrying for me. I mean, not like sell all my Bitcoin holdings worry, but it is something to watch out for, because if all of a sudden, let's say you're fortunate enough to look at this indicator at like the perfect time, and you notice that like everyone's borrowing Bitcoin, that the ratio drops by like 30-40% just out of nowhere. We go from like a 16 maybe to like a 12. And a lot of people are borrowing Bitcoin and not many people are borrowing USDT. That could mean that a lot of potential sellers are on the rise. It could also be a hedging thing, and that's where this gets a little bit muddy, because people could be borrowing Bitcoin to hedge their positions. But if we take this indicator just like naked input and just think only speculative and not for hedging purposes, then that could be a sign of potential sellers on the rise. And that would be a sign that I'd be very worried. And maybe I'd even want to sell before everyone else sells, because if I see a lot of people borrowing Bitcoin, that's kind of like a warning sign for me. So that's going to do it for this video. I think that this is a handy dandy indicator if you're looking to gauge how many potential sellers and potential buyers there are on an asset. Two other ways you can do this too. You can look at on-chain data. You can look at how much crypto is going in and out of exchanges, how much crypto is going in and out of wallets. Second way you can do this, you can look at bullish, bearish sentiment. I typically like to trade against it. You can go to Binance Futures, go to their data page, or go to any data provider like TRDR, Coinalyze. Those those platforms will give you access to how many people are long or short on any specific Binance Futures asset. And then the third way is this. Look at lending ratios. Look at how many people are trying to borrow Tether, how many people are trying to borrow Bitcoin, and what does that tell you about potential buyers, sellers? Combine those three, and you're going to have a really good gauge on not just the mood of the market, but how much buying potential is there out there. So one last thing I'll tell you guys is if you want to say, well, okay, I'm looking at, let's say, Ethereum. How do I know that a big bullish wave is probably going to come within the next few days? Well, let's say you see a bunch of outflow from exchanges Ethereum to wallets. A lot of people are putting their Ethereum in wallets. Second thing you see is, let's say that you think that the long-short ratio on Binance is beginning to go down, meaning people are beginning to enter shorts. And the third thing you see is this Ethereum. I'll just put up here. Let's say that you also see the Ethereum margin lending ratio is just rising, meaning that more people are borrowing USD than borrowing Ethereum. Well, that to me will be very, very bullish, That would be the 3 signs of a very bullish setup. All right, happy trading, and I'll see you guys in the next one.